All right, Proffitt Podcast listeners, I'm so excited for today. We have Theresa on the show. So, welcome, Theresa.
Hi, Crystal. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, this is going to be fun. Okay, so I had put out kind of a call to action in the Facebook group, and I said, hey, we're doing some coaching sessions, and Theresa is someone that we've actually done a session before previously, and I'm excited to hear what you want some coaching on today. So I'm looking at, we did this like short questionnaire when we were having people schedule these, and you said one of the things that you would like some help with is descriptions and show notes. So is there anything specifically that stands out?
Yeah, so since I started my podcast, the Time Tamers Podcast, I've been like sort of focused on working on certain areas of the podcast. Like, okay, first thing I want to work on is figuring out the content planning. And then the next thing I want to focus on is this. And one of the things that I haven't focused on yet is the show notes. I think specifically all I've done so far is just so I use BuzzSprout, and I will just type in like a short little blurb in there, and then I'll link to some things that I mention in the podcast. But I want to have a better system for creating show notes, and I would like to have show notes that are created with more intention. So I know that I would imagine there's probably like keywords and different things that I could do within the show notes that would be more effective. And last thing I'll say is that I know that I've listened to some of your episodes about the difference between show notes and episode description. Yeah. Episode description. So maybe I think that will probably come up in our conversation as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I always tell people when they ask me about show notes, I want you to think about you as a consumer of podcast. What do you pay attention to do you look at show notes? Do you even glance at them, or do you just see the title and then you're like, oh, I want to listen to that, and I go listen to it? Tell me a little bit about what that process looks like for you as a consumer of other people's podcasts.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do notice that when I listen through Apple Podcasts, and when I look at show notes or whatever I see there in that episode, I get frustrated if it doesn't tell me about like something about the episode. And if it sends me to the website, like look at the website link for this episode without first telling me anything, I get frustrated and I might overlook it if the title of the episode is not clear.
Okay.
And compelling.
Yeah. So it's really good to look at that and maybe you could ask some other people. Like I've done this where I ask people, because this comes up a lot because there's a lot of, I don't want to say controversial. Like, come on, we're not gossip girl here talking about controversial things with show notes, but there is a different type of approach depending on what kind of podcast it is. I've noticed this. Like I listen to Smartless, right? This is a comedian podcast. They have the most. If you go and look at any of their show notes, it's like, it doesn't even make sense. And usually it's like a sentence or two, and then it will say like, this is part of Wondery. Like it says something about their studio, but it doesn't really, there's nothing of substance there. But I don't care.
Exactly.
I'm like, I don't care because I want to hear this guest interview. But you're right. There's other podcasts that I'll listen to. So where I want to know more about, is this worth my time? Am I actually going to be interested in this? So keep that into consideration whenever you're kind of creating the format of what you want to include in there. I know some people that will just go above and beyond and they put way too much stuff in there. And it's just like paragraphs and paragraphs. It's like a mini blog post in the episode description. It has all their social links. It has everything in there. And I'm like, you're missing the point. Like the point isn't to make that connection with people there. It's to deliver the content and have something that, like you said, will get them to listen. It's going to compel them to listen to the entire thing. And then if they want to follow up and connect with you, making that call to action within the actual episode will make it a lot easier. So I think, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. One thing that was coming up while you were talking that I'm thinking of is your thoughts on when shows say like at 3 minutes in you'll hear this, and then 5 minutes in for this. Like, what do you think about that strategy?
I think that it's good. I think it's okay. Let me just get you. I have many opinions that have kind of evolved over time. I used to do this. I used to always put chapter markers in all the episodes. I used to kind of break down. You can see this. You can see that. But at the end of the day, I, as a consumer of podcast, I don't skip around an
Right.
episode just to hear one. I will listen to something beginning to end. And if it's not good, I'll just cut it off. I'm like, I don't even care if that thing that they're going to talk about, I'm like, they lost me. I don't even care about the rest of it. So for me personally, I don't do that. And
Mhm.
I don't see the added value of having that information in there, because if I'm going to listen to an episode, I'm just going to commit and I'm going to listen to the entire thing,
Mhm.
or I'm going to cut it off. So that's kind of my non coach approach to it. That's just me personally, how I feel about it. But
Mhm.
I do see where it could be beneficial if you have really specific big things that you're covering in one episode.